Wealth is not armor. Have you ever thought this? That when a woman lives behind a meter-high iron gate with bodyguards, a security system, a private lawyer, she is safe? I used to think so too, until I learned about Priscilla Davis. Because money only creates the illusion of protection. It can't protect you from the man you sleep with, the man who knows all, the codes, the man who has the keys, and most importantly, the man who starts calculating that killing his wife is cheaper than divorce. This is not an ordinary case. This is the story of the richest man ever, tried for murder in American history, and the woman who survived the gunshot but never survived justice. The poorest girl stepping into the richest world, Priscilla Davis, wasn't born into luxury. She was born Priscilla Lee Childers in a small town called Dublin, Texas. Her childhood was filled with poverty, a father who disappeared from her life, leaving behind only a few old photographs. She once said something heartbreaking. My father forgot to do two things. One was to come home. Two was to send money. Priscilla's mother was the sole breadwinner, a woman who once dreamed of a better life, but married twice and was abandoned twice. The whole family lived in cramped conditions, relying on a single uncle and having to count every penny. Priscilla remembers that poverty very clearly. I had exactly 25 cents. I had to choose either a sandwich or cigarettes. In the end, I stole my mother's cigarettes. I smoked so well that my mother even switched to the same brand as me. That was the childhood of a girl who had never been protected. Tragedy came very early. At 15, Priscilla was sexually assaulted by a boy. She trusted a belated apology through the train window as he left to join Army, a wound that never healed. At 16, she had a child, no husband. She hastily married Jasper Baker, a former Marine, only to discover he was having an affair with a 4-year-old woman whom Priscilla, then 16, called an old hag. Abandoned again. She took her young daughter to California in search of hope, then returned to Texas in despair. Her belongings piled in the back of her pickup truck. A Steinbeck out of sync with the times. A ticket to escape poverty or a golden cage? After 2 jobs, 10 months of struggling, Priscilla married Jack. Wilborn, a used car salesman in Houston. Life began to improve. They entered Fort Worth's social circle, but in 1961, Priscilla was arrested for shoplifting. A dress, a sweater, another dress. She pleaded guilty, paid a $50 fine, and then she met T. Cullen Davis, a man who wasn't just rich, but super rich, a Texas oil tycoon with an estimated net worth of $100 to $500 million. The two met at the Ridglia Country Club, playing doubles tennis. Priscilla and her husband beat Cullen and his wife. Not long after, both couples separated. And from New York, at the company's Christmas party at the Waldorf Astoria, Cullen called to propose. Priscilla was stunned, but agreed. From a girl who used to steal her mother's cigarettes, she was about to become the mistress of a multi-million-dollar mansion, a luxurious marriage, and the price of belonging to a man. If you think that from the moment Priscilla entered her marriage with Cullen Davis, all the suffering ended, then know the real tragedy had only just begun. They married on the 29th of August, 1968, a very frightening detail that few people noticed. That was also the day Cullen Davis's father died. That morning, relatives came to offer their condolences. That afternoon, Cullen introduced Priscilla, this is my wife. The faces were expressionless. From the very first day, this marriage had a strange atmosphere, a mixture of mourning and ostentation. A close friend of theirs once said something that still sends chills down my spine today. She's a show-off, and he's a peeping Tom. They were born to destroy each other. And indeed, Priscilla quickly became the perfect exhibit. Cullen used money to rebuild his wife, breast augmentation surgery. Bold outfits, appearances at every major social event in Fort Worth. At the Colonial Golf Tournament, men lined both sides of the fairway just to watch Priscilla standing at the 9th or 18th hole in a short skirt, a low-cut neckline, and once she even had a cast on her leg. But the rest was almost completely exposed. Priscilla knew what people were saying about her, and she didn't deny it. She once laughed and said that she had shaved her pubic hair into a heart shape. Cullen liked that. He often walked a few steps behind Priscilla, not out of gallantry, but to watch the other men looking at his possession. One observer made a truly haunting remark. He treats her like a 1,908 Ford. Everyone wants to own her, but only he has the money to maintain. That, it sounds poetic, but in reality, it was absolute possession. And when a man treats his wife as property, then violence is only a matter of time. Dream Palace, a marble-decorated prison. In 1972, Cullen Davis began building what he called Priscilla's dream home, 180 acres, adjacent to the Colonial Country Club golf course. The house was named Stonegate. Cost $6 million in the 1,970 seconds equivalent to approximately $45 million today. Construction took 3.5 years. 5 bedrooms, 11 bathrooms, over 17,000 square feet, an indoor swimming pool, glass walls surrounding it. Priscilla's bathroom was larger than many people's bedrooms. Hot pink mirrors, crystal chandeliers, a built-in marble bathtub where she could look down on her entire kingdom. But you know what? This house wasn't just built for enjoyment. It was built for control. A closed courtyard, tunnels connecting the areas, surveillance cameras, a sophisticated security system with 2 control panels that Cullen himself oversaw every detail. According to Priscilla's later testimony during the marriage, she was beaten constantly. Her nose was broken twice. Her collarbone was broken once. Her eldest daughter also had a broken nose. Once, Cullen used Priscilla's crutches to beat her while she was recovering from a skiing accident. In a fit of rage, he threw the family cat to the floor to death. And then on Priscilla's birthday in 1974, she discovered her jewelry was missing. She confronted him. She screamed, "You want a divorce? Fine, you'll have it." Cullen replied coldly, "It's all right. I've been divorced before." Priscilla responded, "No, Cullen, not this way. You've never been through this." And that was true. He had never, but he was about to be, and he wouldn't accept it. The next part is when money, hatred, and a court ruling drive a man to a decision that he believes will solve everything. Afternoon verdict, a nighttime massacre. Please remember this date. Afternoon of the 2nd of August, 1976. Judge Joe Eidson ruled to increase Priscilla's provisional alimony from $3,500 per month to $5,000 per month. And that's not all. Cullen Davis was also ordered to pay $25,000 in attorney fees, $24,000 in household expenses. At that point, the divorce had been going on for 2 years, and Priscilla was seeking a settlement of nearly $50 million. Cullen was barred from entering Stonegate by security order. Money was flowing like blood. Lawyers, the court. A woman he hated was taking his assets piece by piece. If you were in the mind of an absolute controller, a man who never accepts defeat, then that afternoon's verdict was not a legal decision. It was a trigger. That night, Stonegate was almost empty. The staff had gone home. Stan Farr hadn't arrived. Priscilla was out for dinner. Only Andrea Wilborn, Priscilla's 2-year-old daughter, had just returned from Bible summer camp, a quiet child who loved to read, alone in the 17,000 square foot house. No one knew that in that very house, a man who knew every entrance, every camera, every code was coming in. Around 12:30 a.m., Priscilla and Stan Farr returned. The door wasn't locked. The security system was off. The basement door was wide open. Then Priscilla saw blood, handprints, drag marks, dark red stains on the pressix, kitchen wall. She screamed for Stan, and from the shadows, a man emerged, dressed entirely in black, wearing a woman's wig askew, his hands wrapped in black plastic garbage bags. Terrifyingly calm, he looked at Priscilla and said, "Hello." Then he fired. The bullet pierced Priscilla's chest, passing through her body, missing. Death by only a few centimeters. Stan Farr heard the scream and ran down the stairs. According to Priscilla, 2 men wrestled through the doorway. Gunshots rang out through the wood. Stan was shot. He opened the door. He tried to grab the attacker, but Cullen Davis pulled away and fired again. 4 shots. Stan Farr collapsed to the floor. Priscilla looked into his eyes. She said, "I looked into his eyes. I watched him die." In the basement electrical room, the police found Andrea, shot once in the chest. At close range, the bullet nearly severed her carotid artery. She died alone on the cold concrete floor. And from that moment, the man who had just left that house became the richest defendant ever to stand trial for murder in U.S. history. But don't think that such an obvious truth will lead to justice, because the real battle hasn't begun yet. In the next part, I will take you into the trial, where the victim is judged instead of the murderer. And believe me, what happened in the courtroom was even more brutal than the night of the massacre, the trial, when the survivor becomes the defendant. If you think that after a night with 3 living witnesses, after a 2-year-old child dies in the basement, after an adult man is shot dead, right outside the door, justice will come quickly. No. In Texas, in 1977, justice still had to see who had enough money to buy a better story. The case was moved from Fort Worth to Amarillo, more than 500 kilometers away, a conservative area, less sympathetic to women dressed provocatively, less sympathetic to ostentatious high society. And most importantly, it was where Cullen's lawyer wanted to try the case. That man's name was Richard Racehorse Haynes, a legend in Texas criminal law, wearing ostrich leather boots, smoking a pipe incessantly. And he won 163 consecutive DUI cases. His philosophy was simple and terrifying. No need for the truth, just sow enough doubt. 3 witnesses said the shooter was Cullen Davis, Priscilla, who was shot through the chest, Gus Gavril Jr., who was shot in the spine, permanently paralyzed, Beverly Bass, the 6-year-old who escaped in, quote, panic. Motives were there, opportunities were there, knowledge of the security system was there. But Haynes didn't attack the evidence. He attacked Priscilla. Week after week, Priscilla wasn't asked about her dead daughter. She was questioned about men in her life, clothes she wore, sexual positions, sex toys found in her home, Percodan painkillers, parties, extramarital affairs. 1. She was forced to describe her sexual fantasies before a conservative jury. A diamond necklace, a gift from Cullen himself with the inscription, "Rich," was presented as evidence of moral depravity, not to prove the defendant's crime, but to prove that a woman like this is not trustworthy. Haynes planted a single thought in the minds of the 12 jurors. If Priscilla lied about morality, she could also lie about the murder of her child. November 1922. After less than 4 hours of deliberation, the jury declared not guilty. A juror told the press, "We can't believe a man like him would do," something like that. Priscilla collapsed in court. A few days later, Cullen Davis was seen playing billiards at the Petroleum Club, as if no child had ever died in his basement. But the story doesn't end there, because when the law fails to kill the enemy, there are those with enough money to find other ways. In the next part, I will tell you about the conspiracy behind the conspiracy, acquisition, the recording, and when good doesn't mean good. And there, you will see how far a man went to never have to pay price after acquittation when good doesn't mean good. Do you think that after being acquitted, Cullen Davis would stop? No, because there are men who never feel safe just because they got away with it. 4 months after the trial, Cullen Davis was arrested again. This time, not for what happened at Stonegate, but for what he was allegedly planning to do next. The FBI launched a sting operation. A man named David McCrory played the role of a hired assassin, wearing a hidden microphone, meeting Cullen Davis in the parking lot of a Coco's hamburger restaurant near Fort Worth. McCrory said something that still chills to hear today. "I killed the no judge for you." Cullen Davis replied, "Good." Just one word, short, emotionless. If you were a normal person, you would think, that's it, a tape recording, an indirect confession. But no, Richard Racehorse Haynes returned. And this time, he brought with him a linguistics professor from Georgetown University. This man stood before the court and said, the word good doesn't necessarily mean good. Maybe it was just a communicative reflex. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the conversation was about sunglasses. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? The first jury deliberated for 44 hours and then reached a stalemate. The second trial ended with an acquittal. All charges related to the Stonegate massacre were completely dropped. Cullen Davis walked out of court once again, free. And Priscilla understood one thing. He would never go to prison. But there was another path. The path Priscilla still hoped for. Civil. Now I will take you into the civil trial. When the truth may lack only 2 votes. And you will see, justice can be so close, but still so out of reach. Civil trial. Only 2 votes missing for justice. When the criminal justice system closed all doors, Priscilla Davis had no other choice. She turned to the civil court. In 1987, Priscilla and Andrea's biological father, Jack Wilborn, filed a lawsuit against Cullen Davis for their daughter's death. Unlike the criminal court, here there was no need for beyond reasonable doubt. Only the preponderance of evidence was required. That is, a probability greater than 50%. In other words, the jury only needed to believe that Cullen Davis was more likely to have killed Andrea than not. The trial dragged on. This time, there was no widespread sexual defamation like before. There were no days of Priscilla being publicly humiliated. And the result was very close. The jury voted 8 believed Cullen was responsible, 4 did not. In many states, that would be enough. But in Texas, the law requires 10 votes to make a civil judgment. Only 2 votes were missing. 2 votes. The judge declared mistrial. Once again, the truth stood right at the door of justice but was not allowed to enter. Finally, Cullen Davis agreed to an out-of-court settlement, about $5 million. It sounded like a victory. But soon after, the oil industry plummeted. Cullen declared bankruptcy. Priscilla received almost nothing. By 1990, the woman who once lived in a $6 million mansion was left with only a 1-bedroom apartment in Oak Lawn, Dallas. No more diamonds, no more evening gowns. She worked standing in the shopping mall at the Neiman Marcus perfume counter, spraying perfume onto small sheets for customers. Meanwhile, her eldest daughter, Dee, spent 9 years in and out of prison for heroin, giving birth to a baby girl while incarcerated in Gatesville. Priscilla adopted her granddaughter. And she said something I can never forget. I think God gave me this baby because he took Andrea away. Everything gradually becomes clear. I will take you to the ending. An ending with no victory, no one punished, only sickness, death, man who never paid the price for anything. If you think this story is heartbreaking enough, prepare yourself because the final part is much colder. The silent death, the lived in peace. Priscilla Davis's final years were free from the spotlight. No more press, no more lawyers, no more courts. Only one woman who survived a gunshot, but never survived the truth. In August 1999, Priscilla discovered a tumor in her breast. The same breast that had been pierced by a bullet 23 years earlier. The doctor diagnosed stage 4 cancer, metastasized to her spine, legs, and liver. No more miracles, no more hope of recovery. In her final months, Priscilla repeated one sentence to anyone who would listen: I will go to my grave with this truth. Cullen Davis killed my child. The 19th of February, 2001, Priscilla Davis died at 59 years old. No money, no justice, no conviction for the man she accused. Meanwhile, what about Cullen Davis? He entered old age without ever spending a day in prison. He became a reborn in faith, preaching with televised pastors, marrying Karen Master shortly after his acquittal. To this day, he still lives in the Fort Worth area, still maintaining his innocence. And somewhere in a cold basement of American memory, a 2-year-old girl died nearly half a century ago without ever being named in a verdict. This story is not just about money, not just about domestic violence, not just about a murder case. It speaks of a system where justice is not measured by truth, but by the thickness of the wallet. And I want to ask you, before I finish, if 3 witnesses are not enough, if a child dying in the basement is not enough, if a woman shot in the chest is still considered untrustworthy, then in that world, who is truly protected by the law? If you have your own thoughts, please leave them in the comments. And if you want me to continue analyzing cases where wealth has distorted justice, please let me know. Because there are stories, if not told, they will be buried, like Andrea Wilborn.